This is our first tutorial, and this I'll be covering the basics of Illustrator as if you've never used the program. So please bear with me if you have a better knowledge of the program. But I will be covering things you will probably never have heard of before, okay? So that's why it's so important to watch this. Uh, this tutorial will cover our first exercise also. And so anyway, let me get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is this new document window. And the reason I'm talking about this window is because last term, my students were unaware of all the options here. We were building a game app, and they didn't realize that they could actually select a certain size that was already preset up. So that's why I want to just cover this for a second because you can, depending on what kind of document you're working on, whether it's a mobile document or a web document, we have a film and video document that you can see here, different ones. Also, art and illustration, we have those for postcards and posters. For the most part, we will be using a print document. And I always use a letter size document unless I'm working on something larger. But we'll be working with a letter size document for this tutorial and for our first project. And so I'm going to cover some other things here. In case you ever want to measure anything, if you are not familiar with points and you're more familiar with inches, you can change that here. Um, if you want to change the orientation to landscape, you can change it here, but we'll keep it here at landscape. I mean portrait. If you want multiple artboards to draw on, you can change that here. We're going to only be using the one. All right. So anyway, once you have that set up, you can go to create, and as you see there, that's actually going to be our exercise. And I'm going to just have this window right here for the moment and just pull it in here to our, because I always work a little differently than most people. Also, one thing I want to do is I want to go back and reset my workspace, okay? Because I had set that up for a former tutorial, which the recording had stopped in the middle, so I'm having to re-record this right now. And if you look at the time, it's 3:03 a.m. So I'm hoping that this recording will not stop in the middle, and that this will be one continuous video. So anyway, what I want to cover next is our workspace. And as you see, I changed that to Essentials Classic. You can always, up under Window, you can always go up, and depending upon what you're working on, if you're working for, let's say, doing graphic design, you need a layout, you can change the layout. If you need to do something that's more set for, printing and proofing, you can change it to that. And as you see, you get different windows that pop up for that. For the most part, I'm going to be changing this back to classic and adapting this. So let's go back here. I just wanted to show you where this is located. And you can also do what I just did, which was reset. Okay, so I'm going to go to Essentials Classic. And we have it set up like this. Now, when I usually work, I like to bring out my palettes because I cannot remember every single little icon here and what they mean. So I like to have my layers palette out. So I'm going to pull this out. We're going to be using our color palette, so I'm going to pull this one out. The other thing I want to cover is there's this little icon on each palette here, each window here, and that is you've got show options. So we're using a print document, so we'll show CMYK. And so you will see this on these different options over here every time you click this. And a lot of times, like, we'll pull out the stroke here too. So I'll pull this out. And I'm going to pull it and bring it up underneath here because that's what I'm used to. Now, you don't have to set up your palettes like this, but I'm setting this up so it's more comfortable for me to work during this tutorial. But the same goes as far as this little thing here. You can see show options, and now we got a lot more options to look at for our strokes. And in case your palette is only showing hide options, we can always bring show options up. You'll see that. Okay. Now I won't really be needing anything else, but just in case, I usually like my gradient over there palette, and I like my transparency palette. And the reason why is because years ago, Illustrator had their palette set up like this, and I'm just very familiar with working like this. So anyway, um, as far as these other palettes, I'm just going to close them because they take up window space. So let's pull this out and close it, and we'll pull all these out together. I'm trying to get them all together here. Let's pull this out here. Oh, yeah, there it goes. Okay, there we go. All right, now I have it set up the way I want it to work. Let's go over to our toolbar, and I'm going to bring it over here so it's more in the middle of the screen. And I'm going to show it like this. So I'm going to, if you see where I'm clicking at, this will widen it so our tools are more condensed. Now I'm going to go over our tools, and you most likely know all our tools already, but I just want to go over it in case you've forgotten or in case you got skipped over, because this has happened to some of my students before where they have not taken applications in industry. They weren't advised to take it to be in the beginning, and so they got skipped over, and they're taking digital illustration um, or image manipulation. So that's why I'm going over this. So our first four tools up here are selection tools. This is the selection tool. And if we click over it, let me click on the next one. See, it says selection tool. I will refer to this as the main selection tool. Uh, my last tutorial, I was watching it, and I referred to it as the direct selection tool by mistake, so I'm hoping not to make that mistake here. Here's our direct selection tool, and what this will select is this will select individual anchor points, okay? And so, if in case you don't know what an anchor point is, let me just bring out a rectangle. We'll go back down to that in just a second. But what this will allow me to do is this will allow me to select an individual anchor point and alter a shape, okay? And there's another tool up under it which we'll talk about later, okay? The magic wand is great. I use it all the time because what it will do is it will actually select uh, multiple shapes that have the same color or the same stroke. It's awesome. It really saves time when you need to select things. And then we got a lasso tool in case you need to lasso something, okay? Now, we've got up under here, this is the anchor point tool, but really should be set to the pin tool because I was doing another tutorial earlier that went awry. So anyway, here's the pin tool. And by the way, if you ever see this little tab down here, this little thing looks like kind of like a dog-eared page. If you click on it, let me try to get to it. Well, actually, I'm click off it for a second. Come back here. Click on this thing. I'm always running into technical difficulties every time I'm doing this. Okay, so let me see if I can get to it. There it goes. All right, there. All right. So if you've got one of these tools that has this little triangle, let's call that, in the corner there, there are other tools up underneath. And you can actually tear this off like this. Okay, all I did was go over and click on that and make sure and let go. Before I was trying to tear it off, but this has multiple tools up under it that we can use. Okay, we have a curvature tool which I rarely ever use. Our text tool we'll use later at some point when we're doing type. We've got our line segment tool, and up under it we've got other tools. Okay, we've got our shape tools. Now the first shape is our rectangle tool, but we're going to tear this off also because we're going to be using this tool during our tutorial, okay? So now up under the next tool over is I have it set for blob brush, but the next tool you'll see on your if you've got your program open, you'll see it is set to paintbrush. All right, paintbrush tool. I actually love the blob brush tool because what the blob brush tool is, the blob brush tool will actually paint shapes, okay? And what it will do is, if you have a Cintiq or a Wacom tablet, if you double click it, you can actually alter it so it's set to pressure, and you can change the variation so that we'll go from, let's bring this up here, okay, and we'll go to variation, we'll bring it all the way over here. You can see, and so basically we can set this up, and there's other things you can set up in here. You can make it so that you can lower the fidelity, so actually it will get more anchor points, or you can make it smoother, or well, I usually always keep it here. But anyway, I just want to show this for a moment because, like I said, if you happen to have a Cintiq or a Wacom tablet, this is such an excellent tool to use. And I rarely use the other tool because this to me feels a little bit more natural, and I get a lot more of what I'm looking for when I'm actually creating an Illustrator. Okay, so let's go on here. Um, we've got the shaper tool. Okay, and up under that we've got the pencil tool. Now I love drawing with the pencil tool. Right now I'm using my Wacom tablet to draw with, just to let you know. And if I'm drawing a shape, it's so cool because I might be tracing on top of an object, or if I'm drawing, let's say we're doing with strokes, and we'll talk about strokes and fills in just a second. But this is really cool. And like I said, any of these tools here, in case you didn't know about it, if you double click, you've got all these other options. And usually they come like this. Okay? And we want to keep things selected. We want to close our paths. We want to check everything here, okay, if you're ever using this. And so this is awesome because one of the things, this is usually unchecked. You want to check this because what this will do is if you're drawing something and you want to smooth it out, what it does is it allows you to go over it. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down the Alt key, or the Option key that is, and it's actually smoothing my path, okay? So this is a great tool for that. You have to select the path in order to use this. And this will work with any path you've drawn, even if you've drawn it with the pen tool, okay? So I can go over this and see it will smooth things out, okay? So anyway, I just want to show you that because in case you are more advanced, these are things you may not know. We have an eraser tool, which is great if you're using the blob brush. Let's see, you can always erase it out. Well, actually, you need to select that shape. So let me select it. And let's go in here and kind of see that it will actually erase. So it's just like, and this, like I said, this works great if you're using the blob brush. And, by the way, you can set this up. So this is set for pressure. Now, what's interesting about this is that, and this kind of annoys me. This is what I always complain to my students about with Adobe. They like to do weird things, and they change where the size is at. So the size on this is down here. So if we change the variation, what this means is that the more we bear down, the thicker this will become, okay? So we want to bring that variation all the way over. And the less pressure we use, it will practically be nothing. So as we're using this, I can bear down more. You can see how much it's erasing there. So these are useful tools to know how to use for future projects. And in case you were very much more advanced and you didn't know that, this will be helpful so you can start using that, okay? Now, let's continue on. We've got scissors tool, which I sometimes use. Over here, it's usually set to rotation tool. But up underneath it, you'll see the reflection tool, okay? And that's very useful. Now, we've got the scale tool. Now, what the scale tool will do is, and we'll just, let's select this shape here. I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut V to get to the main selection tool, as I will call it, and delete that. And we'll just draw out another shape here. We'll draw out an ellipse, okay? Draw a circle. And by the way, when you're drawing out these shapes, hold down your Shift key. You'll draw out a perfect circle. If you don't want a perfect circle, you let off your Shift key, you draw an ellipse, okay? And if you want to draw your shape starting from a center, okay? Basically, if you hold down your Alt keys, let's say we've got one shape like this, and then we wanted to draw another circle inside that, we just hold down our Shift key, okay? And so let me get everything here. Command A, delete. So let's say I'm drawing a tire. I'll hold down the Shift and the Alt key or the Option key here, and then draw another one here, just like that. And that's how we draw a tire. Okay? Now, what I was going to get to is this. I rarely ever use the scale tool since they started using this bounding box. And this bounding box came along well before the legacy editions. And it's so useful. because with this bounding box, you can rotate an object. Of course, we're not seeing it rotated unless this was pinched. So let's pinch this. Now you can see that's getting rotated. All right. Or you can scale it. You know, if I hold down the Shift key, it will keep it in proportion as I scale it. But anyway, about the only reason I ever use the scale tool now is it's a great place to change your strokes and effects. So, and by the way, before I move on to that, I want to cover something because I've last term in one of my advanced illustration classes, I had a student that had turned off their bounding box by mistake. And somehow they had itchy fingers and they hit these keyboard shortcuts and it hit it. Whoops, that's a different one there. Sorry about that. They hit, let's see, we got hide edges, which we can talk about in a moment because I just did that. But what they did was hide bounding box. Sorry, it took me a little while to find that. And so what happened was they were going, Mr. Moyers, I can't figure out how to, it won't let me scale this thing. What's happened? I'm on this tool and it usually works. And so I came over and showed him, this is what happened. Oops, I hit the wrong one again. I apologize. It's a little late, as you can see on my clock there. And I want to double check to make sure this is still recording. So let me show artboard, which we'll cover in just a second. And we will show bounding box. And so that's why I'm showing this, because like I said, I had a student one time who accidentally lost his bounding box, could not find it, and that's how he turned it off by accident. Okay, so anyway, that's why I rarely use this scale tool. So the thing about the scale tool is this. Let's say we put a stroke weight of 5. Let's go up higher here. Let's say we put a nice stroke weight on that. And let's scale this thing down. Imagine we're creating maybe a logo or something, and we want to scale this down. And as we scale, and when we scale it down here, look what happens. Well, first of all, it works right because I have this already checked. So let's go back here. Usually it's set up like this. These things are unchecked. Okay? So when you're scaling an object, you scale it way down. You see what happens? The strokes remain the same size. So that is the reason why I use the scale tool. If any, for the only reason is there's another place you can change this, but this is the quickest place to change this. All right, I'm going to click both of these here. So now when I scale, it will scale up the stroke weight. So the stroke weight will remain the same. So if we go back to, let's say we go back to an 8-point stroke and we scale that down, it will scale down the stroke weight. Okay, and that is where you find that at, up under the scale tool. So let's undo that because I want to show you the next tool here, which is our width tool. So one of the things I have a lot of my students do for our projects is we use Illustrator to create inked drawings, and we can get a drawing in Illustrator that looks like it's done with a brush pen, so it looks a lot more natural. And the way we do this is we come over here and we click and we can drag out and we can alter the width of our stroke. And it's an excellent tool because I won't be using this for the tutorial. I may be using this for our first assignment tutorial, but for this tutorial I'm not. This is the only time I'm going to be showing this. Anyway, last week I was working, and by the way, if you want to turn this off, last week I was working on a project, and I had changed the stroke width on my strokes, and then I said, I don't think I want that. I think I just want to keep them uniform. Well, the way we can change that is let's make sure these are selected here, okay, and something's not showing up right, so let's click on one stroke at a time because there it goes. Okay, now if you've got the one shape selected, you'll see this. Now, by the way, if you're not seeing your control panel, because sometimes this happens, I know they made an upgrade to Illustrator, and for some reason they hit the control panel and my students were not able to find it, and they were asking me what happened to it. Well, up under Window, you will see the control panel. Okay, the Window control panel. There you go. All right, so let's go back here. We can actually change this to uniform. So we can change this so it doesn't have all those different widths. Okay? So if you ever need to draw something that has different widths, you can change it with the width tool. And if you need to take those off, you can take those off so quickly. Okay? So let's go back here. All right, so now up underneath this, we've got some other great tools here we can use. We may use these in other projects. Um, we got the free transform tool, which I just love. Because what the free transform tool will do is, let's say we've got, let's say we got something like this. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to, make a quick little illustration here. And I'm going to actually copy this. And the way I'm copying this is I'm moving it over and I'm holding down my Option key, which copies it. I'm holding down my Shift key, which keeps it going straight across, okay? So let's say we wanted to make these shapes go in perspective or kind of distort them. If we go over to this tool, this free transform tool, make sure it's up and running. All right. I'm not seeing it. Obviously, there it is. It was hiding. Okay. All right. So, we can do free transform, which basically is what the bounding box says. We can do perspective. It does this. So we can change the perspective of our circles there, okay? Or if we want to distort, this is a great way to distort your vector drawings, okay? So I use this all the time, and it's a very useful tool, okay? So that is our free transform tool. All right, up underneath is Puppet Warp, and Puppet Warp will give us more options here, but we won't be using that right now. And there we go. Okay, so yeah, Puppet Warp lets you actually really get in here and change things. And this is sort of similar to what's in Photoshop. I just took that off there, okay? So anyway, let me hit delete on that. Our next tool down here is our Shape Builder tool, okay? Our Shape Builder tool is really cool because let's say we have a rectangle here, okay? And we'll fill it with black. And actually, you know what? Let's fill it with a percentage of gray. Let's say we're creating a little illustration. And I decide to draw like a hillside. I'm going to use my pencil tool, okay? And we'll just draw like, let's say that we're doing a landscape here, and we'll draw a hill. Now, usually what I do is I will draw the whole thing and go outside the drawing. And we'll make that black, okay, so that we can see that. Now, I want to crop. If I want to crop that, if I select both of these things, I'm using my Shift key. Now, you could drag over and select both of them, but usually, if you're selecting, sometimes, most of the time, I use the Shift key, and I use the selection tool, and I click one shape, and I click the other. Well, this Shape Builder tool, the keyboard shortcut is Shift M. So I just keep after I select those two shapes, I keep the Shift key held down, then I go to M. Okay? Now, what I can do with this is if I hold down my Alt key, I can get rid of that. So now this is a great way to crop shapes. So you don't have to try to draw that hillside as far as the corners to match the rectangle, okay? This is so quick. It's so great. And you can combine things too, all right? So we'll be using that later on. So that is a great tool to use. Now I'm trying to click up underneath. Okay, we've got Live Paint, which I never use Live Paint, by the way. Perspective Grid tool we'll get into when we do 3D effects. Also, when we do 3D stuff, we'll use the Mesh tool. Our Gradient tool, very easy to use. If we go over here to our Gradient, actually, I've got both those things selected. Let's say our little illustration, we wanted a sky, okay? And as I tell my students, skies, if you take a look at any illustration, or any photograph, you most likely will see a sky that goes from lighter on the horizon to darker at the top, okay? And so this is what our gradient tool is used for. And you probably already knew that, all right? By the way, I had a student last term that wanted to do a sun, and they're going like, how would you do a sun? And we were doing like these 3D things, and they were trying to make a sun. And so what I simply did was, let's go over here, and we'll make our sky, we'll click this, we'll make it blue, okay? Now I'm going to change this to a radial gradient for a second. You already began to see this as a sun, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another, and we can do this several different ways here, but I'm going to just click in the middle here. Okay, I'm going to add another little slider here up underneath by just clicking up underneath this, okay? Let me take that out for a second, okay? The way I did that was I clicked up underneath this gradient bar here, and I'm going to change that. And see, this is why I like to have my gradient set up with my color, is because I like to go over here and I could like to change the color with it. So let's say I was changing that color. So say I can make a sun, and we can actually like pull this in a little bit more. Whoops. So the sun is really bright. Okay. Now, if we want to change the size of the sun or the direction of the sun, we can do that. Okay. So this is a great little way to do a sun, by the way. Anyway, let me continue on. We got our eyedropper. You know, if we want to change the color of something, very simple to use. Let's say I had another color out here, and this color happened to be, well, we don't want that in it. I'm going to take that off for a second. We'll put a kind of a green color in this or something, you know, or we use a swatch. But let's say we had a bunch of different shapes here. They had different colors, and we wanted to change, you know, this hillside here maybe to one of those colors. Then we use our eyedropper, and we can change the color. Okay, very simple. Check what's underneath the measure tool, which I have not needed it. It's good to know that's there. We got our blend tool. Now I want to show the blend tool because I have a lot of students that are unaware of it, and it is a great tool, and we'll actually use this in our tutorial. So what our blend tool is used for is in the old days. See, I have been using Illustrator now for nearly 30 years. And in the old days, we did not have gradients. We had blends. So if we were trying to create a gradient like a sky between two different colors, okay, we're going to use this, you know, a lighter gray, and we're going to use black. Then we would have to use the blend tool, and what we do is we click on one shape, one anchor point, and we go down here and click on another anchor point, and I'm hoping you see this. This should be a plus sign down here. I was watching the last tutorial that went awry, and I wasn't seeing everything. So if we click that, see, it creates a blend, or, you know, what looks like a gradient. Now, I don't know if you're seeing it, but I'm seeing lines through this. If we double click our gradient tool, you'll see, our blend tool, you'll see what's set to smooth color. We want to go to specified steps. And so what's happening is the smooth color didn't have enough specified steps, so we can go and do, let's say we'll do 300, and we'll hit preview. Whoops, I did 30. Well, and that's one of the things I want to show you next. But let's go up to preview here, and see, that will make that smooth. Now, you're probably asking yourself, why would I need to know that? You know, I could use a gradient. Well, there's so many things you could do with blends. And one of the things we can do with blends is we can blend, yeah, we blended two strokes there, but we could blend actually two different shapes here. Now I'm going to take this one shape, and I'm going to fill it with black. And then I'd make another shape. I'm just, you know what? Here's my shapes down here. I'm going to try a star. Okay. And we'll make this star white. All right. Now let's go over here. And what I'm going to do is get my blend tool again. And I'm going to click on one corner, and it will indicate, I don't know if you're seeing this, but as I roll over, my blend tool changes here. And I've got a little star next to it that tells me I'm on top of an anchor point. So I'll click that, and then we're going to go and click on an anchor point down here. Now I'm getting a plus sign. And what this will do is it will create a blend like that. All right? So you can do some really unique things with your blend. And by the way, okay, so we got our selections tools here. If we try to select the star and move it, it moves the whole thing with our main selection tool, with the selection tool. We might be able to get to it with the direct selection tool, okay? Yep, see, I can get to it. And also the other tool is this group selection tool, which we'll use in just a moment also, but I'm using it now too to show you. Now let's say I wanted to rotate that star. Well, if it's selected with this selection tool, and then I go back to this other selection tool, what I call the main selection tool, the one that has the black arrow, and we rotate it, see, we can we can really distort this. Now, of course, if we're going to get to it again, we need to select it, and then we'll move it again. And, now we get something more like that. And so we can just keep playing around with that. All right. And get some cool effects there. Anyway, you might be going, well, that's cool, but, I don't need to, I wouldn't use that. Well, there's other things. Last week I was working on this project, and I was doing something that where I was showing hatching and cross hatching. And instead of drawing every individual line, what I did was I drew 2 lines, and I used my blend tool, and I went and double clicked it, and I did specified steps, and I would change and lower this number of specified steps to maybe, let's go down to 40. Go preview, and you see it does all those lines in between. And this saves so much time here, okay? And so if I was doing hatching, I could get that shape, If I was doing cross hatching, let's say we're doing cross hatching here. I can copy that, paste in front, Command C, Command F. And by the way, if you don't know those keyboard shortcuts, you can find them up under Edit. You see what cut, copy, paste in front, paste in back, okay? So a lot of times I'll be using my keyboard shortcuts for that instead of going up to there. Let's see, I could get cross-hatching, okay? All right, so you might go, well, you know what? I might rarely use that. But there's another thing we can do with this. And that is, let's say you're drawing a flag. Let me go back to my star tool here. We'll draw out the star. We'll just leave it as a default. I'm going to click and drag this over here, like this. And I'm holding down my Shift key. I'm going to hold down my Alt key, my Option key here. And so that will copy it. Now, if I wanted to do a flag with with stars, I could copy and paste and move them around. But with this blend tool, I can click on one anchor point and click on the same anchor point on the other star. I'm hoping it will do it. No, I'm having issues. Okay, there it goes. And see, it will actually draw those in between, which is awesome. And if we wanted to change that, we can go down to specified steps, and let's say we want less stars in there. We go down to 2, and it will evenly space it out. So this saves so much time here, and it's a great shortcut. And a lot of teachers don't show this. I use it quite a bit when I'm doing multiple things. Let's say I'm drawing windows, and I draw a window, and I want to copy that window, and I want multiple windows because I'm doing a building. That's how I would do it very quickly without having to copy and paste each one. Okay. So anyway, let's move on here. We got the symbol sprayer, which is a bunch of things, and we may be getting to symbols later. I never use a column and graph tool because I never make columns and graphs. Okay. We got our artboard tool. So in case you ever need to change your artboard, you can manually change it, like crop it, okay? If you want to change, just type in a number here, and let's say we wanted a square artboard that was 5 inches by 5 inches. We could do that, okay? And if we didn't like that and we wanted to go back, we can go back and change this to a letter size artboard and change it back to portrait, okay? So that's why it's good to know about your artboard, because you can make changes. You can add artboards too. One other thing about the artboard, I'm going to click off of it for a moment, is sometimes I will be working and I will have drawings off to the side here. And it just kind of annoys me because I might be working, I might have this, and I've got an illustration in the middle here because this was happening to me last week when I was working. And it was annoying me that all my drawings, that didn't have fills I could see through. Well, you could always hide your artboards, so that basically, you just got a big white canvas to work off of. You just got to be mindful of where your workspace is, okay? And if you ever need to show it again, you go to Show Artboard, okay? And that's how we would do that. Now, let's continue on here. And so we got the slice tool, which I really don't use, the grabber hand. Now, this is where my tutorial went awry. So I'm hoping I don't turn off my tutorial by accident my recording here. Well, let's say that we want to move around here, and let's say we were zoomed way in here like this, okay? And I wanted to get somewhere quickly. Well, your grabber hand does that, but and what's funny is this: if you look at the keyboard shortcut, it's H. Well, there's another keyboard shortcut, and I don't know why they don't put it on there, but it's the space bar. Okay, so if I use my space bar, I'm hoping I don't turn off my recording here. See that? It becomes a grabber hand. All right. Now, if I'm working on another tool here, let's say I'm drawing, or maybe I'm drawing something like this, and I get so far, and I go, okay, I want to move. Then I just click on the space bar, move it up, let go of the space bar, and it returns back to my tool. So this is very useful, and the space bar works the same way in Photoshop too, if you need to change it. And I believe it also does it in After Effects too. Okay, so this is so useful if you're needing to move things around. You don't want to have to go over to your grabber hand. You don't want to type in H, because when you do H, it goes to the grabber hand, but then you have to go back to P for the pen tool. Okay, so anyway, that's why we would use that. Now, let's continue on. So up under the grabber hand, let's see what's up under here. Oh, the print tiling tool, which is useful for when you're actually having a tile there. And of course, you've got your zoom tool. Okay, keyboard shortcut for that is, and I'll go to another tool here, is Z. Okay, so I'm just scrolling, and I'm zooming in. Okay, now you can click and zoom in. If you hold down your Alt Option key, it will zoom you out. Now there are keyboard shortcuts that are a little quicker. If I want to see the whole page, I do Command 0, or if you're on PC, it's Control 0. Okay, if I want to zoom in, and for some reason, sometimes I've been working in different modes where you just could not get to the, you couldn't use the zoom tool. You couldn't get to it because you'd have to click out of it. But I could do Command plus and zoom in, okay? Or Command minus and zoom out. All right, so those are useful things to know how to use, okay? Now, every shape, and I would say that everyone here would know this, but just in case you didn't know this, every shape, anytime you draw a vector shape, right now we got a star. If we draw it with the pen tool, let's say we just draw a simple shape here with the pen tool, you have two options. You can have a fill and you can have a stroke. So I'm going to actually, right now this shape has a fill of nothing. Now we could put in a color quickly. Okay, that's why I like to have my color palette open. And we can also take that stroke off. So maybe I just want to work with shapes. A lot of my illustrations are shape-based, and I don't use strokes or outlines. So if I'm doing that, I might want to be just working here and changing this so that this maybe is a brighter yellow. Let's go down to a brighter yellow. So anyway, you can turn off your stroke. Now, you can have a stroke on it too, and that's simple enough. Okay, but that's your fill and your stroke. And so if you want to have a stroke and no fill, you can go to your fill here and hit none. Okay. Let's say you want one of these things. Now, mind you, one of these shapes is overlapping the other. Okay. And if we did not want to see through this shape, we could put a fill of white and it will overlap it, okay? So that's one way we can hide our lines if we got shapes underneath other shapes, okay? So that's useful to know because we're going to be using that. All right? I'm looking, I see that this is still recording. I'm crossing my fingers. Okay? So now we've got color, we've got gradients, because we could put a gradient in something, okay? And we got none. That's another keyboard shortcut for none. I mean, not keyboard shortcut, but another place to find none located. And as you see, there's the keyboard shortcut for that. All right, now, up under this is, we got draw normal, which we'll be using. Later on, we may use draw inside, which is actually creating a clipping mask, okay? And actually, I could show that really quickly here. So let's say we have a shape here and we want to draw inside it. And let's make this shape. We'll fill it with this color here. But then we want to draw inside. And what draw inside will do is it will create a clipping mask. So I'm going to go and use my pencil tool and draw another shape here. And fill this with a different color. And see, it will actually, it's not cropping. What it's doing is it's created a clipping mask for us. And we can continue to draw shapes. And as you can see here, it will just continue to do that. Now, once you get out of it, it's kind of hard to get back into it. But that's what that is used for. And this is really useful when we're doing things that look three-dimensional and we want to put on a feathered or a Gaussian blur on an object, but we don't want it to be seen on all sides. And we'll get into that later on, okay? So that's what Draw Inside does, all right? So now let's get to our tutorial. And what we're going to be doing is, as you may guess, is we're going to be making a snowman, okay? So I'm going to create this, and we're going to do it real simple. You may go, why a snowman? Well, it's simple, it's easy, and it's kind of fun. I've built 2 tonight already, so let's get started here. And so anyway, first I would start off with an ellipse. And like I said, if I want this to be a perfect circle, I hold down my Shift key. And, whoops, I'm holding down my caps lock. I want to hold down my Shift key, okay? So therefore, I've got this held down here. And now I got a perfect circle, all right? Now, I want to draw another circle for the body here. So this is like the bottom part. This is like his torso. And what I can do is, notice this. This is our smart guides showing me my alignment. All right? Now, if I want to draw my circle so it's drawing from the center, I hold down my Alt key or my Option key. That's what they're both called, Alt or Option. All right? And then I start dragging out. Now, if I hold down my Shift key, it'll keep making a perfect circle, okay? So it does that. Now, as I said before, if I was drawing this and for some reason I did not have the fill of white in there, this is what I'd be seeing. Okay? So let's put that fill of white back on. Now, the other thing is this. What if I drew my torso first? And then I decided to draw the bottom part of the body down here, which I want to probably draw it down like this. Then our snowman, it would be kind of unusual. It would be like we were looking up underneath the snowman. Well, we can move our shape. So you don't need to delete a shape if you draw it in the wrong order. And there are ways to move these things around quickly. And up under Object, we've got Arrange. And as you can see, we got Bring to Front, Bring Forward, Send Backwards, and Send to Back. And the keyboard shortcuts I use are for Bring to Front and Send to Back. So if I want to, I can bring this to front by holding down Shift, Command, and right bracket, and that'll bring it to the front. Okay, so in case you draw something out of order, you can move it that way. There is another way, and that is you can actually go into your Layers palette and readjust it like that. Okay? But if you've got a lot of shapes, let's say you've got an illustration, you've got 50 shapes, you don't want to be doing that. That's why it's good to know about bring to front and send to back. And there's another thing I'll teach you later on that'll be very useful to coordinate where your shapes are located. And one of the things I want to talk to you about, in case you have not figured this out already, was years ago when I was first learning how to use Illustrator. It was a computer program. I was used to drawing and painting. And then I was having to deal with these strokes, these fills, and these shapes, and I started to realize that, if these were different colors, this was a lot like using cut out paper, like construction paper, and stacking it, So if you think of Illustrator that way, like you've got all these different shapes that you're stacking on top of each other, That's how it works. Okay, and that's how you build things. And like I just showed you, you can maneuver that. So now we've got our body for our snowman. So let's zoom in here, and then we're going to build the hat. Okay, we're going to give him that classic top hat. So we'll start off here with the brim of the hat. And on this brim, we're going to make it black. Okay, and let me zoom in here. We're making this pretty big here. But notice this. I swapped the fill and stroke. And so this has a stroke of white. And this happens sometimes when you're starting to use Illustrator for the first time. And you'll see something where it's like erasing a line. And you're wondering why. And that's because that stroke is on there. Okay? And so you can always take that stroke off. And that won't go away. Now the other way I could have done it was I could have put a stroke of black on it. All right? So we wouldn't have been erasing that. So that's our brim. Okay? We'll bring this up a little bit. We'll make this, we'll alter its size here for a second. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the portion of the hat, the cylinder portion. Okay, so let's start off here, and we'll just do copy, Command C, and paste in front. Now nothing happened, but if I move this away, you see it pasted a copy of itself. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to alter this shape here. I'm going to hold down my Alt key and alter the shape a little bit, okay? And then I'm going to move it up a little bit like this. I'm not holding on my Alt key anymore. And let's make the shape a slightly different color because it's going to be the brim of the hat, okay? I originally had it set for gray, but I was looking at references of snowmen, and most of the bands that go around the hat are red, so that's what I'm doing here, is making this a red. And we can always click a red, or if you're using CMYK and you don't know what red is, CMYK, C is for cyan, which is blue, okay? But magenta and yellow combined together will make your red. And if you want to make it less red, you can either add a little bit of cyan or a little bit of black, okay? Just to let you know about that. So I'm going to keep it like that for the moment. We may change that later. All right, now, what I'm going to do is I want to make this brim of the hat, but actually I'm going to make the whole hat here, and then we'll go back to the brim. So let's go and let's move this up and hold down my Alt key, or my Option key that is. They're both called the same thing there, okay? And move this up here like this, okay? And then what I'm going to do is, we'll make this part a black, okay? Maybe we'll make a percentage of gray. There we go. Then I'm going to get my rectangle tool, and I'm going to hover over the end here and try to line this up so that we've got something like this. All right. So now what I've got is I've got the top of the, and we can make this black, by the way. And so let's bring this ellipse forward. Okay. So hopefully you guys are following along. If not, you can always go back and start this from the beginning, or pick it up in the middle here. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I got that selected. I'm going to do Shift Command right bracket and bring that forward. All right, so that's the top of the hat. All right, I'm going to bring this forward too. So let's do this. All right, and then what I'm going to do is, well, before we do anything else, I want to talk about cylinders. And the reason why is because I'm always having to talk to my classes about what a cylinder really looks like. Because right now, both the top and the bottom are the same curvature. So I'm going to go over here to one of my earlier demos that I was working on. And I downloaded this image of an oil drum. And usually I usually use an object in the class, and I show it to the student, and I point to the fact of, which side of this cylinder is closest to us. So you may be asking yourself, well, what's he talking about? Well, imagine you're standing here, and we're probably, maybe our eyes would, if we were standing next to this thing, our eye level would probably be about here, perhaps. And therefore, this top is closest to us, and this bottom is farthest away. Now, when you have a cylinder and you're looking at it, the side that's closest to us is more elliptical. And what that means is that it's a pinched circle. You know, it's much more elliptical versus the side that's farthest away from us. And that side that's farthest away from us is much more circular. It's got a greater curvature, okay? So, if we go back here to this, and we wanted to give it the appearance of a little bit more depth, then we can take one of these cylinders, we'll take this one and make it a little less pinched, and this one we'll make a little bit more circular here. Now, if we're going to do that, we're going to need to do that to the brim too, okay? And so this is what really looks more like a, and if we want to, I'll hide this quickly here. We'll do Command 3. We'll make this black for a second. I'll use my eyedropper. And so, you know, this is kind of what a cylinder looks like if we're just looking at it and we're trying to make something look more three-dimensional. Okay? So anyway, let's go back here. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to create the band. And so I'm using this ellipse, and I'm going to move it up here a little bit, okay? I'm going to hold down my Alt key and my Shift key. And then I'm going to pinch this a little bit more, okay? Pinch it in just a little bit more. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to use my scissors tool, because I could use my scissors tool to cut this. But what I'm going to use is I'm going to use my direct selection tool. I'm going to click off of it for a second, and then I'm going to click on this one anchor point here, okay? And I'm going to hit delete. What that does is it will cut that in half, all right? So it deleted that portion. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my pen tool. P for pen. And as I drag over this, I'm hoping you see this because, like I said, I was looking at my earlier tutorial, and not all this shows up. But as I drag my pen over that, the pen changes, and you'll see a slash. And that means I'm on that anchor point, and so I'm going to click. I'm going to hold down my Shift key, come down, and it tells me where the other anchor point is. I'm going to go straight across, hold down my Shift key, go back up. And that is how I can create the band there, okay? So now I've got all that situated. And now what I'm going to do is let's do this. These are two separate shapes, and they're the same color. Well, let's combine those. Now I can use my Shape Builder tool, okay? So here's my Shape Builder tool. Shift-M, remember, is a keyboard shortcut. And I can do that, and that will combine them all. Now there's another tool here, and that's our Pathfinder tools. So let's go bring up our Pathfinder. And sometimes this is very useful because it's a little quicker, especially if you've got a lot of shapes that you're trying to combine all at once. And the first little button here is called Unite, and that will unite that and create that band as one shape. Okay? Now, let's select all these shapes here. And so I'm going to click on this shape, hold down my Shift key, click on the rectangle shape, and then click on the band, and then click on the brim, and then we're going to group it. Command G will group it. And what that means is now when I click on one shape, it'll click on all of them, unless I'm using the direct selection tool. Because if I want to move one shape by itself, I use the direct selection tool, okay? Or if I want to go in here and change the anchor point, okay? So anyway, with this selection tool here, as I would like to refer to as the main selection tool, we can move our hat, we can resize it if we want to, you know, maybe make it more like that, maybe make it a little bit more taller, and we can also rotate it, you know? So maybe it's on his head like this, okay? Now, I'm referring to it as a him. We could refer to it as an it or a they, or it could be a she, okay? But right now I'm creating a, I call it a snowman. So, and the reason why I'm talking about that is because that's going to lead us into our first project here, which I'll talk about at the end of this tutorial. So first, let's go and create an eye. Now, for our eyes, we can make them the same shape, or if we want to, we can have fun and make the other eye not as big. Now, if I wanted to copy this shape, of course, I've talked about this before, I'm going to copy, Command C, and paste in front. And then I'm going to enlarge it. And you probably know what I'm doing already because you saw the other snowman I had. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into a monocle. So it's kind of like Mr. Peanut. Okay? So now this is what we have. And next I want to go over our pen tool. Now I've already kind of used the pen tool, but in case you are not as familiar or you have used it and you didn't have much luck with it in the past, the way our pen tool works is if you click and you click and you click, and you can create a shape, okay? Or you can create an open path, okay? Where maybe it's just a stroke. Now, if I want to curve something, and if you're hearing a noise, it's my fan of my computer running. So let me go back to my pen tool. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to come over and click again. And this time I'm going to keep my finger on the mouse button, okay? And before I let go, I'm going to drag. And when I do that, I get a curvature, okay? So this is how I get a curve. Now, let's say I'm doing a mouth, and I want that mouth to be open. Well, my problem is this, is that wherever I click, it's going to curve it, and that's not what I want. I want to have control of where this next anchor point's going to go and the path it makes. So what I'm going to do is I am going to delete one of these handles. And one of my students referred to it as killing the second handle. So if you hear me use that term, that's what this means. And that is I'm going to go back to this anchor point here. And hopefully you're seeing this. And when you go over it, the pen tool will have a little arrow underneath it. And so that signifies I'm right on top of that anchor point. If I click, it will delete that other handle. So now I can go up and I can make my path go straight. Okay? Makes everything much more simple. So I have greater control when I'm drawing. All right? So I'm going to go back here and click on this anchor point and delete it. Okay? There we go. All right. Now, let's bring our mouth over here. Now, right now I'm trying to move it over, but I'm not able to select it until I click the path, and that's because there is no fill inside. Now, if there's a fill inside, I can click in the middle there, and I can move it, just in case you didn't know that, okay? And so I'm going to make this much smaller. And so one of the things is that with Illustrator, a lot of students, get frustrated because they draw a shape and it's not the way they want it, and so they'll delete it and redraw it and redraw it. But what the thing about Illustrator is, it's very editable. And that's why we use this direct selection tool, because we can make this shape the way we want to make it. Okay? So like if this was a Photoshop, if this was a drawing done in Photoshop and I was wanting to change the mouth, I'd have to erase it and then redraw it. But now this is Illustrator, and I just click on the paths and the anchor points, and I alter it. Okay, whoa. That really is going way out there. Okay, I'm keeping an eye on my clock there, and see it's getting close to 4 a.m. So I am a night owl, by the way. So anyway, let's say I like that for my mouth. Okay, I'm going to make the stroke weight just a little heavier here. And actually, you know what? Let's zoom out here. And let's make the stroke weight for the outer shapes here. We'll select those. We'll make those, right now they're at different sizes. We'll make all those, let's say 3 points. Well, maybe 2 points. I like that. 2 points is good for this right now. I might go back and make my hat just a little larger here. And I'm not even holding down my shift key. I'm letting it distort. Okay. And maybe I might angle it so, well, actually, I kind of like that angle. All right. So anyway, let me get back in here. And what I was going to talk about is, if we look at this, the corners of this, the corners are very, well, they point. Well, under your stroke palette, in case you didn't know this, we can change the corners so they curve. They look a little bit more natural. Okay? All right. So that's what I wanted to show you on that. Now, let's create the nose. And I was looking at Frosty. He has a button nose or whatever, but most snowmen I've seen have a carrot for a nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an ellipse here. A circle. Let's draw a circle. I'll hold on my shift key here. Okay. All right. Actually, he looks kind of cool like that, but I'm going to make it a carrot. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my direct selection tool here, and I'm going to click off the shape for just a moment and click back on it so that I can actually get to that anchor point. Now I'm going to pull this out, and you may be thinking something here what that looks like, but we're not going to say that out loud. But what I want to do is I want to point that. Now one way I could point this to make it more like a carrot is I could do this. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm moving things. Didn't mean to. Okay, I could do it like that. And I could actually move these anchor points all the way in and kind of hide them in there. All right. But there is a quicker way to do that, and that is this tool right here. It's called the anchor point tool. I may be referring to it as the convert anchor point tool because that's what Adobe used to call it. And if I click on this point, it boom turns it into a corner. Very useful, especially let's say if we had something that had a rounded. I know there's other ways to change this, but let's say I wanted to round just one of these corners, then I can actually get this anchor point tool and do that. All right, and that's by just clicking. We'll go back up to this one, clicking and dragging. Sometimes, for some reasons, sometimes it's like this, and then you have to do that. And I'm still trying to figure out why it does that on some of these corners. But anyway, I just want to let you know that. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to show you is let's use our blend tool. All right, I'm going to pull this out here a little bit. And as you can see, it has a fill of white because if it had a fill of nothing in there, we would be seeing that. All right, but let's say I wanted to draw these curves. And the last time I was doing this, I was doing it up close and didn't look right. But let's do it, and then we'll zoom out a little bit here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a curve. Now, let's aim for the middle there if I can. I don't know if it'll let me here. Okay, here we go. And then we'll just fix that there, okay? Now let's zoom in here. Sometimes if your paths are not meeting up right, then what happens is you'll see kind of a corner like this. Okay, so that's why I'm trying to move those right. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit so we can see if that curvature looks right. Okay, it looks pretty good. All right, so let's take this and move it over here, or we can just draw another one. Well, I just saw something there, but we'll get to that in just a moment because we may see that again here. So anyway, make sure nothing's selected, because if this thing was selected and I use my pen tool, it will add an anchor point, okay? Which is useful if you want to add an anchor point and move this thing out, but I don't want to do that. So keep it deselected, okay? One of the keyboard shortcuts to deselect is Shift Command A or Shift Control A if you're on a PC, okay? Anyway, let's draw another curvature instead of just copying that one. Okay, and let's zoom in here a little bit, and let's make these a little smaller so they're not the same stroke. We're going to go down to, let's say, 0.75. Now when I do that, the reason I did that is because I wanted to show you this. Zoom in here, and you see this situation here. What is happening is it looks like it's erasing part of that stroke. But in case you didn't figure this out yet, it's because this open path here has a fill of white. So if we turn that off, it will look like that. And we won't see it cutting into that. All right, I just wanted to point that out. Now let's zoom out again. I want to see what this looks like. All right, it's not bad. So let's move this one over a little bit more. Okay. Oops. See that problem there? We're going to take that off there. Also, let's zoom in here. And I was going to cover this later, but I might as well cover this now. See that little corner popping out there? We can make that shorter by using a rounded cap. Oh, I didn't do it. Spoke too soon. I'll show that when I'm making his arms, okay? His arms and his fingers, okay? But anyway, let me zoom out here. All right, so what I'm going to do is, I could keep drawing these, but I said I wanted to use my blend tool. So let's use our blend tool. And I'm going to click on one anchor point on the end. We'll do the top anchor point here. And we'll click on this one. And then we'll go over here, and we should get a plus sign. And click here. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, boy, that did something horrible. Because sometimes you make it does mistakes. Okay, so undo. So I'm going to try this again. I'm going to click here. I'll come over here and click here. Whoa, keep doing it. Okay. All right, let me try this again. I'm going to click from this one to this one. And it keeps doing that. Must be, well, let's zoom in here. This is just not my night. Or my morning, I should say. All right, so let me fix this here. I'll select both of these again. Get this blend tool. Cross my fingers. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now I got it. So sometimes if it doesn't work, undo and make sure you get in there close enough to get to the anchor points, because it may select upon another path and do something really weird. Okay, so now it doesn't look quite like a carrot. It kind of looks more like a screw. Okay, so let's go and double click our blend tool and go from smooth color to specified steps. And we're going to lower that down to maybe 4. That looks better. Maybe 3. We'll do 3 here. That looks better. We might even go down to 2. I'm going to go down to 2 here. So I'm having to click on and off preview. There we go. I like that. We'll click OK. All right. Now, one thing I want to talk to you about before we get too far here is this. Is that I haven't mentioned this yet, but when you're working in Illustrator, you're working in preview mode. Or as they call it, preview, or preview on, well, basically if we go up here to view and go to outline, you will see the vector path. Okay? We'll go back here and then we go to GPU preview. Okay? So, in outline mode, and the reason why I'm talking about outline mode, because later on we'll be tracing out on top of a template. But what I wanted to point out is, you see those strokes? They don't show up because that blend. Now this will print no matter what, and we see it no matter what. But if we wanted to get to one of these individual lines and change its color or change its shape or direction, we can't do that. But what we can do is this. We'll select the blend and we'll go to Object, Expand. Okay? And so now you'll see this pop up. We'll go Expand Object, Fill, and Stroke. We'll click OK. And now each one of these is an individual path. And we can move those if we need to. Okay? Now, the thing is that they are grouped. So if you want to ungroup them, you have to ungroup them. Okay? So you do Shift-Command-G, which will be the shortcut there, but sometimes I go up there to show you. Okay? So now we got the carrot for the nose. Now we're almost done here with him. So now we just got to create the buttons. Because you will most likely see, if you're drawing a snowman, you'll see like buttons like this. And we'll swap the fill and stroke so that's that way. We're going to use a blend again. Okay? So I'm going to copy this, bring it down here like this. Whoa! Let's drag it and hold down the Alt key. There we go. Now, let's zoom in here a little bit better. And let's get the blend tool. And we're going to click on this anchor point down here. And this should indicate when we come up on the anchor point on the other circle, you'll see a plus sign. All right, now I drew that correctly. And if it did not draw it correctly for you, undo and try and aim again, okay? Sometimes it takes a few times because you may have it may have selected the shape below, or sometimes it'll do weird things. You know, sometimes I've seen it where it will just do a weird shape like that. And most of the time it's because I'm clicking on one anchor point on one circle, and I'm clicking on another anchor point, another circle, not the same one. Okay, so I just want to point that out to you. And see, it's doing that even when I'm clicking the right anchor point. Let's try it again here. There we go. So sometimes it's going to do some strange things. You just undo it. All right, now let's double click this. We'll go to specified steps. We'll do, let's say 2. Let's preview it and see what that looks like. Okay, that's fine. Now, if we zoom out, that doesn't look correct. That does not look correct because it's straight up and down. It doesn't curve with his body there. Well, one thing I learned about is a long time ago I was doing a demonstration. I was noticing this line and this line that goes in between there. Now, it used to be in outline mode, yeah, you can see that line there, okay? Well, what I realized was if I use this anchor point tool and click on one of these, I could curve it. And that's what I'm doing here, okay? So I'm actually curving this a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to come back to my direct selection tool and just make it better. Okay? So now I can distance these things and curve them too at the same time. And that looks close enough to what I was looking for. Maybe. And the thing is, I can always move one of these things and see I'll move it with it. Okay? So that makes it very, very easy to do. And, you know, like I said, we can always go back in here and change the angle of that a little bit more to fix that if we want to. All right, now, let's get on. We're almost done here. All I got to do is draw his arm. So let's draw out one arm here. Now, it's got a fill of nothing and a stroke of nothing. And the reason why is because I was on that invisible line there, that in between. So that's why, because usually it's whatever the last tool you were on is what it will, you know, whatever the settings were on that fill and stroke is the next thing you draw, that's what happens. So that's why that happens. So we're going to put a stroke on this one. We'll up that stroke weight quite a bit here. Okay, let's zoom in here. So he's going to have fairly thick arms. We're going to move that in closer like this, okay? Now, I'm going to draw out his fingers. And I don't mind it, but one of the things I show my students is that, you know, if we want to make the path, because if you're looking at this stroke, the end of it looks very rectangular. I was trying to show this before, but if we want it to look a little bit more natural, we can go over to our caps options. Now remember, if you're not seeing your options on your stroke, make sure you show options. And we can click on round cap. There we go. And so now that will look a little bit more natural. Okay? And so now we'll go do the next one. All right, so we'll draw this out here. Maybe we'll actually, since he's at an angle, maybe we'll actually put it inside his body instead of at the corner there. Okay, there we go. That looks a lot more natural. All right, and then let's zoom in here. And one thing I forgot to do is save this, and that's not good. Because if this had crashed, I would have lost this. So we're going to talk about saving. Okay, so now I've got my snowman. Very basic, okay? We can move him so he's more in the center here. We wanted to resize him. We can resize him, okay? You see, because this is scaling the strokes and effects, it scales down the strokes, or we can make him larger, just to see, okay? Anyway, you should always save things before you get too far, and usually when I do a demonstration, I forget to. So let's save it, and we're going to go to Save As, okay? We could go save because we haven't saved it. Now, when you're doing your things, now see, I've got so many things on my desktop here, as you can see here. All right, so what I want you to do is, whenever you're doing a project, this will be an exercise, use your last name. We'll call this Moyers. Use your last name, not mine. And we'll do EX1. Okay? All right, now, save on your desktop so you can find it. We'll go to Save. Now, before I click OK, I want to talk about something here. All right, now you're going to be working at home. You're not going to be going to any other computer lab to work, but in case you were, I want you to understand something. Not everybody uses the latest version of Illustrator. And last term, when I was teaching, Adobe upgraded to 2020 Illustrator, but the Art Institute didn't. And the Art Institute usually cannot upgrade until in between terms. So my students were coming in with these projects, they saved it 2020, and they weren't able to open them. And they were getting so frustrated. Fortunately, I brought my computer, my laptop, and I have the current version. And I told them to email it to me, and I showed them how to save it so they could work on it at the school. And most computers will have at least legacy. Okay? So anything that you see CS1, this is CS legacy. Okay? So basically, most computers will run that. We'll create a PDF, we'll keep all this the same thing here, and we'll just click OK. So now, in case you send that to somebody who does not have the latest version of Illustrator, they can open it. And if you need to save it down even earlier, you can do that. Okay, before we end this tonight, and I'm crossing my fingers that this is recorded the whole thing, I want to go over here and talk about our first project for just a moment. And I got to type this up. I've got to type up this assignment sheet, this exercise too, so you will have all the instructions, or at least know your due dates and all that. So anyway, our first project is we're going to design and create a snow person. And for our first assignment, once I get it up, you'll see it. I'm going to have you create some sketches, and we'll talk about that more when I do the tutorial. But these were some quick sketches I drew tonight. I used Photoshop. You can use pencil and paper or pen and paper. And anyway, I just want to show that we can do anything with our snow person we want to. And think about this as a character design. For maybe it's a cartoon. Maybe, it's one of those weird animated cartoons you see on late at night on Cartoon Network. Or maybe it's for a game. Okay? So I just drew these quickly up. And I said a snow person because, we can make a female. And I wanted to do more things with that, but I was just wanting to do this quickly. This I was trying to do more like Frosty. So for those people, for those of you guys out there who are really good at drawing and you think, well, this is such a simple assignment, this sucks. Well, you can actually create a character that has a lot more detail, a lot more depth, and if it doesn't quite look like a snowman but looks really cool, I'm good with that, Because what we want to do is I want to get you designing and creating a cool looking character. So that's something I want you to start working on, and we'll talk about the number of sketches you'll need in my next tutorial and my assignment sheet that I'm going to post up.